Hello, welcome to the Breakdown. This program is being brought to you by the African National Women's Organization, ANWO, a mass organization under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. The Breakdown is a monthly news, analysis, and opinion program, as well as a platform for highlighting guests whose issues spotlight the international plight of colonized women fighting colonialism. My name is Coco Lewis. I'm the lead coordinator of ANWO's Harriet's Daughters Book Club and Study Group and the MC for the Breakdown. I am joined by the leadership of ANWO, President Geshide Oramila, who is the leading member of the African People's Socialist Party, and Jay Amiche, a ANWO member and producer of the Breakdown. Today, we are discussing hood feminism and the illusion of liberation for African women, a critical examination of the narratives that claim to empower African women while often leaving us trapped in the same system we seek to escape. We'll explore how mainstream feminist movements, even those branded as progressive, Black, or radical, can still fail to address the unique struggles of African women. Before we break down in today's program, let me remind you that ANWO is an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, revolutionary African internationalist membership organization for African women who organize around pressing local, national, and international issues that contribute to the special oppression of African women and femmes. Our vision is to create a world where African women have agency, are valued and protected, and are the makers and shapers of a new society. If you enjoy our content, consider becoming a member. If you are African women or financially support ANWO and the ANWO Liberation Center. Our goal for this broadcast is to raise $250. You could donate at any point during the program by going to anwoohuru.org/donate or on sale at info@anwoohuru.org. You can wear your revolution by purchasing our merchandise at anwoohuru.org/storefronts or decolonize.com. As we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on all of our platforms. Comment on where you're watching from. We are streaming live on the Burning Spear TV and ANWO African National Women's Organization YouTube channels, and also on ANWO's page on Facebook. We encourage you to share this program with your network and comment shared in the chat if you do. Chat with us during this conversation as is a critical analysis and conversation by typing in the comments. I'm excited for today's discussion. Uhuru comrades, welcome to the program.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru comrades, thank you so much. So welcome. So today is the breakdown, and thank you so much for that introduction as always, Coco. And I'm Yejide, and it says they're president of ANWO. Been that for about 10 years, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. And I just want to ground today's conversation. You know, obviously, ANWO has been really critical of feminism because we believe it's a petty bourgeois analysis. But this is not, and we're going to go into more about what we mean when we say that. So it's not to go in and dig on folks, but it's to really help us all engage in like a conversation around what does this all really mean in terms of the final analysis. Where do we want to go with any analysis around African women who are colonized African women? And I think that's the central question where we want to really get at, like, you know, all of these feminisms, all of these ideas around women and how to frame it, womanism, feminism, hood, Black, radical, things like that. Like, how do these terms really define, I would say less define, but more lead our people, lead women, African women into, you know, overturning our relationship to the system that oppresses us. So we'll dig into some of that. And so we're going to break down, we use in the title hood feminism, and this is not a term that we've quoted or that we've created. I wanted to just read a little bit of something about what it is and how we see it and where did it come from. So hood feminism is both a book and a title, a book and a concept that critiques mainstream, mostly white, middle class feminism for ignoring the real and urgent issues affecting marginalized women. especially Black women, poor women, and women from the so-called hood or working class communities. The term comes from the book Hood Feminism, notes from the women that a woman, sorry, I'm messing up this whole title. The term comes from the book Hood Feminism, notes from the women that the movement forgot by Mickey Kendall. In it, Kendall argues that mainstream feminism often centers issues like glass ceiling and body positivity while overlooking things like food insecurity, housing, gun violence, poverty, education, healthcare access, and criminalization, issues that deeply affect women in marginalized communities. And I don't disagree about those being issues that African women and this term says marginalized women are experiencing. I think that where we may differ or diverge is basically identifying or naming it feminism, and centering patriarchy, which is what all feminism is based on. So Comrades is going to jump in and talk more about, just how they understand like the question of radical or progressive feminism, and how this has, I think, I would say that I see feminism obviously as one of the dominant ideologies that are out there, that anybody who says that they're about women, they must be a feminist. You have to fall into this box of feminism, because outside of that, then it's really hard for people to understand like how you could still be focused on women, and still not be a feminist. But there's a lot of things about feminism that we don't unite with, and it's not like we're trying to change feminism. We're not going to call it something else. We're not going to call it some, we're not calling what we're doing some type of feminism. What we're calling what we're doing, and what how we're organizing and how we're educating African women, is about freedom. African liberation is tied to that struggle. So, I wanted to open up a discussion, obviously, around, our thoughts around not only the term hood feminism, but there's so many different terms. And one of the things that I think dominates how people understand feminism is like, you don't really understand feminism. It's really attributed to how people feel at any particular time about any particular situation. It's particular to themselves, how they're feeling. So I'm just going to open it up to the comrades and see what you have to say.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so much I can say, but I feel like this book is part of this tradition that I would say of what I call of like lifestyle feminism, which was made popular by people like, for example, Kimberly Crenshaw, who I know a lot of people are see her as the mother of this topic of intersectionality, which I mean, first of all, Claudia Jones talked about triple oppression decades before that. But a lot of people don't know what the background is. What's the material circumstances behind how she came up with this term and how it was popularized? So she was an employment lawyer, and she was representing corporate women, Black corporate women, who had filed a complaint because they were not being promoted in the same ways that Black men and white women were. So they're like, well, we have this special oppression, because so they lost the case. And the reason why they lost the case is because they couldn't prove that they were discriminated based on gender, and they couldn't prove they were discriminated based on race, because Black men were able to receive something and white women were able to receive something. And so, they were basically denied their promotions and their elevated income and all that. And so Kimberly Crenshaw sees that as this, great injustice, and that is the spawn, like that is what spawned the concept of intersectionality. So for me, this concept of intersectionality is rooted in sort of a corporate U.S. like first world kind of understanding of the world, and then it kind of set off this chain off which people have latched onto, which a lot of people call, I guess, third wave feminism. And third wave feminism, even though it is, I would say, a lot more cognizant of Black women's issues than maybe first wave with Gloria Steinem, who was an active CIA agent, but we won't go into that. So people are seeing this kind of new wave, and they're saying like, okay, well, the first wave didn't represent us, and the second wave didn't represent us, but this third wave, it represents us. It has all these Black women and etc. But even this third wave is really not looking, like really not focusing on the material, not just material issues. Like it might focus on the issues, but it doesn't talk about like the root cause of those issues. Our capitalist economic system. So it doesn't go that far. And even the author of Hood Feminism, I mean, if you've read her other stuff, her name's Mickey Kendall. Like she's very much, you could tell that her audience is probably like white women or like Black women who studied gender studies at PWIs, which I'm not downing. Like I critical gender studies too. Like I'm not downing those folks. Like I have been those folks. But that's her audience is folks who maybe have read feminism and they were like, well, this doesn't represent me. And they kind of went out searching for a type of feminism that does represent them. And so she has this feminism that's like, well, what about us from the hood? And like, what about this? And it's like, yes, that's important to be recognizing people's material circumstances, but like we need to be doing the dialectical method. We need to be understanding historical materialism about like why we even got here. And like that's just not happening even with this third wave. And it seems like there's this focus on like putting the primary contradiction and the focus on patriarchy as opposed to as opposed to colonialism makes it so there's these sort of like gender categories that assign a specific, like a particular way of being to all of the folks within those gender categories when that's just not true. I mean, there are like ways in which white women oppress Black men, and like there are so many different like levels in which you can oppress folks based on class and all these other things. And so, you know, when we're looking at this kind of third wave as like this way of bringing in Black women's issues, the root cause of Black women's issues is colonialism. And if that's not the main point of the analysis, what the fuck are you even doing? Like, what are we doing here? You know? And so like that's when, you know, reading that book, and I read it a while ago. I haven't reread it recently, but I did skim through it because I actually do even have the book that was given to me as a gift. And I was like, oh, okay, now I remember why this shit pissed me off. I also, you know, looked back at her background, and she was in the military for a decade. And I'm like, oh, so you are like actively colonizing other people, like, you know? And so I'm like, I get what she's trying to do. And I get that, you know, maybe for the average white woman who looks up to Gloria Steinem, like, it's like, wow, I really never considered the Black women in the hood. Like, this is a revelation. Maybe it's good as a stepping stone for them. But I feel like, you know, us, you know, and you know, I feel like people that want to have a complex, really rooted understanding of like what it's going to take to solve these issues and what it's going to take to actually like bring about true revolution and true liberation. Like this lifestyle feminism is not going to make us more liberated. Like for Kimberly Crenshaw, if those Black women had gotten their raise, that would have been the end of it. There would have been no intersectionality. Like literally, it would have been done. You know, that's all it took. And so it's like when you think about it that way, it's like, well, you know, and so another, not that I want to go down a rant right now, which I'm already down there, but I'm going to wrap it up in a second. And I just want to say the last thing that kind of angers me is there has been decades and decades of women's liberation work, revolutionary women's liberation work that has been happening, and everything has been subsumed under this label of feminism, even though most of these people, like, I mean, they were alive before feminism was even a concept. Like, of course they didn't apply. Like Claudia Jones, for example, like she never identified as a feminist. Why are other people identifying her as such? I've, you know, and all sorts of folks who identified in specific ways. They did have ways in which they didn't identify. Like she did identify as a communist and a Marxist. So why are you calling her a feminist, but you're not calling her a communist, which is how she identified herself, you know? And so that's one of the things that really annoys me, where I'm like, these people actively identified what their political ideology was. And you are ignoring that and then subsuming or like just superimposing a new identity that they never took on over, like onto them, as if, you know, that's the natural and normal thing to do. And I think it's so normalized that happens that when I point it out to people, they're like, well, of course she would be a feminist. And I'm like, no, see, again, you're putting a label on her that she didn't put on herself. She did associate with certain labels, and those aren't the labels you're bringing in here. So why are you not bringing in the labels she did associate with, and why are you superimposing this label that she didn't associate with onto her? You know, that like that question is just something that I find that people don't ask themselves. And I think it's because there's a way in which feminism is subsuming women's liberation movements in order to neuter them, in order to take away all of their power and to remove all of their revolutionary potential out of them. And then it becomes, once I get a job, then, Barbie feminism, you know what I mean? And it becomes all of these things that don't liberate us, in fact, make us more entrenched in this colonial system. And so, anyways, I've rambled on long enough. But I'll let
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
jump in because I can ramble on this
I,
all day.
I also read this book, and you know, I almost feel like if you are in this, it's written in a very, even though she is called hood feminism, it's still her basis and her because this is really very much based on her actual living life, and is a working class life with petty bourgeoisie aspirations throughout the whole book. Like you said, she went to the military. She pursued this feminist education. So she, and the book very much is targeted to me. And I had to look up I had to go read my review on that I made on the book when I read it, because I read it back like a few years ago, just as a critical analysis type situation. But her book is very much catered to educating white feminists about Black problems, or African problems, I should say. And really, that's petty. That's clear petty bourgeoisie aspirations there, where you want to get more of the pie, and you want to go into these. You want to be involved in these circles where you get you get individual um achievements and individual accolades, and not really of pushing. It's that, was it not, is it Booker T. Washington, the bootstrap mentality? Put on your bootstraps and get into this assimilation type situation. And I didn't feel connected with it. And maybe because I was, or had already been an African internationalist at that point, I already understood where the root of the problem. Where you cannot continue to cut off branches if you don't handle the roots. The fruit is still going to be rotten if you just keep going after the same old. Let's get more, because she talked about having on food stamps and stuff. Let's get more food stamps. Let's get more of this, instead of let's tear down the system. Let's go ahead and be self-sustaining us within us as Africans around the globe. We know we have the skills, we have the resources. We just need to have the power, dual and contending power, and then the whole power, the whole room.
I just if we could pull up Gio's comment. And I totally agree. This is what feminism does, is make women into a homogeneous group with a shared worldview that flattens differences in material conditions, political commitments, and historical context. Absolutely. We say in the movement, like, there's no such thing as women in general. Like, so, and feminism will have you thinking that all women experience the same thing in the same ways, and that our men of our different nationalities are the oppressive force, and then that is, and that's because of patriarchy. They're allowed to do that because of patriarchy. But how does then feminism speak to the disproportionality of how white women of the oppressor nation can also oppress African men? And
Mm-hmm.
you can't really make sense of that within patriarchy. We can make sense of that within colonialism, right? We understand that the colonizer group, male, female, everybody is a colonizer group, is able to oppress the colonized group, no matter who they are, male, female, babies, adults, all of them, and it's really important for us to recognize that sort of dichotomy that does not exist within feminism. I think what intersectionality tries to do is bring in all of those things, to help us understand, like, in which ways somebody can be oppressed within the system, but it also then tries to equalize some people by saying because you're physically disabled or otherly abled, right? Or if you're a trans person, and that somehow equalizes you to the oppression that somehow an African woman feels, even if she's not differently abled or things like that. And that's not what we believe, that if you're differently abled colonizer, you're a colonizer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like there ain't no there's no question about it in our mind. Like, you benefit from sitting on the pedestal of oppression of African and other colonized people, and African women belong to that. Other colonized women belong to those groups. And so it's our responsibility as women to point that out. And we don't believe in the homogenization of that, because the reason why there's so many different types of thoughts around feminism and everybody's breaking out and doing so many things is because this one definition, this homogenization of women, does not apply. People are like, well, I'm a black woman. I'm came out of hundreds of years of slavery, and my continent was colonized, and white people been here. White women have been sitting on the backs of my foreparents as they carried her across the Sahara. You know what I mean? Like, that don't what I've seen does not justify or verify like what you're saying is happening to me based on some mainstream and broad stream feminism. And so, our I just wanted to lay out like some things. I'm gonna put the difference between, we talked about the book Hood Feminism and some of the thoughts that were shared in that book. And we talked about African internationalism. And if you're new here, you might not know exactly what African internationalism is. And so we just want to let you know that we are African internationalists. We are African women who believe that the freedom and liberation of African women is rooted in the freedom and liberation of all of our people. That you cannot get freedom for a sector of our people if we're not fighting to overturn the overall oppression that we're experiencing, which is colonialism. And so feminism, depending on which iteration you're talking about, none of it says that they want to get free, but all of it talks about different types of oppression, right? So the political foundation of hood feminism is bourgeois, as we've just already talked about. It's a petty bourgeois narrative that was mainly created to explain what's happening to Black women, to mostly a non-Black African, readership. And it's reformist, it's US based, it expands feminism to include poverty and how that impacts African women. African internationalism is anti colonial and anti imperialist, and we see colonialism as the root of our oppression. Um, the state is really not brought up in other kinds of feminism. Like, they don't see the state as an entity that is um, the architecture is the administrators of colonialism. So in her feminism, it critiques the inequalities and but does not challenge the colonial state. And of course, in African internationalism, everything comes down to state power and how do African people get state power over over our own lives, right? So we identify the state as the colonial tool and calls for the dismantling of it. And around gender and class, while hood feminism addresses race, class, and gender and focuses on poor and marginalized women, African internationalism centers class, the nation, and colonialism and African women as colonized workers. And then liberation goals. So, mostly all feminism is there to seek inclusion and policy shifts for survival underneath this current colonial mode of production. And for us, we demand the total liberation of African people, the revolution. I mean, and if we're not talking about that as an end goal, then all we're talking about is shifting around power and waiting for the Supreme Court or some other court to make a decision that's going to make our lives a little bit easier, and then waiting 10 more or 20 years for that to be overruled so that we're in the street to do the thing again, instead of really fighting for a right and just society. And then movement strategy is really issue based, localized, organizing within structures. And then for us, we are a global organizing, movement, and we want to build independent African institutions, dual and contending power, so that we are preparing ourselves to govern. We're preparing ourselves to live in a society that we want to create that will most definitely represent our interest. So there are some other things. We have some um, examples here too. There's, we're talking about feminism and hood feminism as the title, but we're going to talk about some other kinds of feminism. And we know that some people say, well, feminism, yeah, we don't dig that, but we are into womanism, right? Have y'all ever heard of womanism? You said yes.
I've heard of it, but I've never been able to get like a definition of like what exactly it is. I don't know. Like, do you have like what is your understanding of womanism?
Oh, listen, I have gotten I've gotten a whole PE book from from a womanist organization, and it was just like feminism and womanism is to feminism like lavender is to purple. Okay. And so it's like an aside. Womanism focuses on African women, our lives, and centers the family, the black family, which does not alienate black men. So that is the central part of how they organize and to like talk, serve, um, uh, uh, resolve the issues that we are experiencing as the African family that gets put on us because of the state. I might be messing up a little bit, but that's the general understanding that I have around womanism.
Okay. That makes sense. One thing I wanted to bring up is, we always say this thing about how um, we see not patriarchy but colonialism as the primary contradiction, and I feel like it would be worthwhile to clarify like what exactly does that mean, because I feel like maybe people don't know what it means to say that, and
Yeah.
and we might all three of us have completely different understandings. I'm just going to say what my understanding is personally, which is that I'm not saying that women's oppression did not happen until Western colonialism. Like, there were thousands of different societies. All of them had their unique relationships to gender. Some of them were oppressive to women, some weren't. There's so many understandings of gender. You couldn't really point to one system and say, okay, well, this is the one system where every single male is oppressing, every female, or etc. And so I wanted to read this quote because I feel like it
Mhm.
really highlights why colonialism is a primary contradiction.
Right.
And also, before I get into the quote, actually, I wanted to bring in Kwame Nkrumah. I was just rereading some of his work, and I was rereading some of his critiques of people like Richard Nyerere, who was the first president of Tanzania. And he talks about this kind of ujama, this kind of African specific form of socialism, and there was this trend back then that Kwame Nkrumah talks about, but it's even now, it's even today, where people see pre-colonial African society as this
Utopia.
classless, genderless
Yes.
utopia, and it's like
That's not how it
that's
works.
Yeah,
not
didn't
like
we
what it
talk about
was,
that? Like, it's
so
all types of things going on.
yeah, and like I said, there were thousands of societies. Like there was
Mhm.
not necessarily one understanding of relations in general.
Right.
So, this idea that like, we could uh like basically, Kwame Nkrumah had this idea around class struggle, and I think it also applies to or classes, and I think it also applies to genders, where it's like the way that classes were understood in African society, and also, uh, transversely also to U.S. society as Africans transported there, is all our class system was completely broken down, completely
Mhm.
ground into nothing. The class system, the indigenous class system, whatever one existed within whatever specific tribal society that we originally belonged to, all of that is gone. All of that was destroyed by
Mhm.
colonialism.
By
And,
colonialism.
and on the grave of that, a new system was built, a new
Yeah.
class system was built, a new gender system was built on top of the dust of the destruction of all that.
Right.
I mentioned this quote that I wanted to read, which I feel like it really just sums up, and it's from Maria Lugones, and this essay is called Heterosexualism in the Colonial Modern Gender System.
Mhm.
So it says colonialism did not impose pre-colonial European arrangements on the colonized. So there wasn't like this pre-colonial man equals this, woman equals this in Europe that they just forced onto African people. That didn't happen. It
Mhm.
imposed a new gender system that created very different arrangements for colonized males and females than for and then very different arrangements than for white bourgeois colonizers.
Mm-hmm.
So thus, it introduced many genders and gender itself as a colonial concept and mode of organization of relations of production, property relations, of cosmologies, and ways of knowing. But we cannot understand this gender system without understanding what Annabelle Quijano calls the coloniality of power. The
Mm-hmm.
reason to historicize gender formation is that without this history, we keep on centering our analysis on the patriarchy, that is, on a binary hierarchical male supremacy, without any clear understanding of the mechanisms by which this capitalist heterosexuality, racial classifications, like without that, it's impossible to understand that apart from each other. The
Mm-hmm.
heterosexual patriarchy is an ahistorical framework of analysis. To understand the birth of the colonial modern gender system to the birth of colonial capital is to understand the centrality of the coloniality of power to that global system. And so that centrality of power, that global power, that that basically organized life anew. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think when people talk about the patriarchy, they're talking about this since the dawn of time, since time immemorial, men have oppressed women. And it's like
Drag
that's
you by the
that
hair
doesn't
type
make
shit.
sense. Like there were thousands of ways in each continent. There were hundreds of thousands of languages and peoples and relations that are not reflected in the new colonial order in any kind of way. And to superimpose the current conditions of our new colonial order onto those ways of being, which I mean, fundamentally have mostly been erased, truly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Many of most indigenous ways of knowing, most indigenous ways of being have been completely erased. And that
Mm-hmm.
includes relationships of gender.
Yeah.
And so to superimpose our current system onto that is to really like mash two puzzle pieces together that don't fit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, anyways, again,
Mm-hmm.
ranting, I can always go down a
You wrote a brilliant piece, and I think it was like it's an essay for us, and we have to pull it back up, and we should include that in the anthology that we're creating for
Of
the
course,
FBS
it's gonna
book
be in
club.
the anthology.
But it was dope, and I think that you can go down a rant on this all you want to. There's actually people who've identified feminism. I'm sorry, Coco, did you want to say anything
No,
before?
go ahead.
Okay. There's also people who still identify, radical colonial, anti-colonial people who still identify feminism as the ideology that they want to still persist by separating themselves from mainstream feminism by calling it imperial feminism. Um, and what they're doing as some sort of other progressive form of feminism. We just want y'all to drop the feminist term. Like,
Right.
we shouldn't be hanging on to that. What you're doing is trying to liberate your people. And women are a part of your people. Like, we are the people, and in most cases we are nearly half, if not half, of the population um is of our group. So we should be like, yeah, we trying to get free. And I think that really will shape how then the women who are participating in this freedom movement, because it's always tied to a national liberation movement or a movement to get free from under the grips of colonialism. Some people may call it fascism, but we say colonialism because this has been the overarching oppressive system that has trapped African people within this dynamics of oppressed versus oppressor. It was, the reason, Jay, I agree with what how you define colonialism as the primary contradiction. This is the same of what we say as African internationalists, is that you know we have colonialism, which again deposited through the attack on Africa from Europe. When you have a different system in Europe, you had a system that was arranged where women were the property of men. The whole system in Europe. And I'm going to say all of it because I think, the minute they tell a lot on themselves by their own history and their own movies and their own documents and how Europe was arranged in where that, women were the property of men. When they started to branch out and attack the world, they set up many replications of themselves. So the policies and the institutions that, even if there is like the way that the society was set up, where is that men might do this thing or women might do this thing, now it's set in stone based on, now it's either changed or the maleness is given more precedence than what society actually needed, and that didn't serve society. What that did is serve the colonizers themselves. It wasn't there, it wasn't meant to serving the people that it was colonizing. It was there to support the rape and the pillage and all of the things. So that system worked for the European because that's European was the one that was there and making these policies, and they needed the colonized folks to dally along. So it wasn't just that they landed there and they threw policies down. There was war, there was violence, there was rape, there was religion. There were different methods of colonialism to whip the people into submission. And so this is what we are experiencing. So people might think that the way that we've been has been the way that we have been for forever, and that's not real. We have learned, we don't even know how to be authentic African people sometimes. You know, not even on the continent of Africa. You know, we don't know.
This is what Kwame Nkrumah said, where he was like, we like this concept of, even he, you know, he also critiqued the idea of like negritude and like there's this inherent blackness and something that makes us black. He was like, no, what makes us black is our relationship to Africa as colonized people. Like that's what makes us black, is this material relationship that is based on like a historical analysis of like what happened to us. There is no just, you know, floating out in the air blackness that exists. And I feel like there's the same, it's just kind of the same thing with, you know, how I see like feminism. It's like there isn't necessarily this floating uniform gender that exists outside of the material conditions. And, you know, you mentioned the article that I posted, and just to, you know, toot my own horn and, you know, free promotion,
right,
put it in there. And I talk a lot about the idealism of feminism. And it's like, we need to have a material understanding. If we are going to have a true liberatory society, we need to have a material, like we need to base our analysis on material conditions. And let me tell you, the thing that, because I told you I used to study gender in college, and I identify very strongly as a feminist. And the thing that blew my mind, the thing that turned me around, a conversation I had with someone, and, you know, we were talking about revolutionary theory, and they asked this question, and it wasn't even like a gotcha, but it ended up being kind of a gotcha. And we're talking about women's liberation. We're talking about, you know, just liberation, African liberation movements. And this person asked, has there ever been a women's liberation movement that freed a people?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, not really. But has there ever been a African liberation movement that has liberated and freed women? Multiple. There have been many. In fact, the reason why we even have feminism is because the Soviet Union was doing all of these amazing things. Literally, like, we have abortion rights because of what the Soviet Union was doing. You know, women have access to schools in much better ways because the Soviet Union based their analysis of what society should be like on material circumstances. And like, there's a whole book about it. It's called Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism. And it
let me go write this down.
Like, it was like, it talks about what your material circumstances were like as a woman in a revolutionary society. And it's like, you were educated, you know, you weren't reliant on a man in any kind of way. You had a lot more freedom, like there before and after. Before, oh my God, like imagine Russian society in the early 1900s, Russian society, early 1900s versus after the Bolshevik Revolution. Night and day, like those. And I know that, you know, maybe those women didn't experience true liberation because, you know, they could have their husbands beating them at home. There could be any number of circumstances where, you know, they might be still experiencing some kind of oppression. And also, like, they could leave that situation because they had the material circumstances to allow that to happen. Like, they had the tools to become independent, so they weren't reliant on men in the same ways. And then, you know, and at the same time, all of this is happening. It's the 40s and the 50s. It's like, you know, the U.S. is backsliding into these very traditional gender roles, very oppressive gender relations. And people are seeing that. And they're like, in the Soviet Union, women have jobs and educations and they can have abortions. And we're stuck at home vacuuming, at least the white ones.
Mhm.
Right?
Anyways, we know black women have always worked. We know black women have always worked. They're talking about first
Just
wave
get off the boat.
feminism. What their concerns were in first wave feminism was they were seeing what the Soviets were doing, and they were like, I want a piece of that, and also
Yep.
communist China as well. They saw what was happening over there, and they were like, I want a piece of that. And the government was like, oh crap, if we don't do something about this, then they're going to socialize this country. And so they gave them feminism, literally. Like Gloria Steinem, who most people have referred to as basically kind of the mother of feminism, was CIA funded. Her student groups were CIA funded. Miss Foundation was CIA funded, like, and so ever since then, we've gone off track, and we've really focused on this ideological understanding of gender as this inherent genderness, inherent womanness, inherent manness, that puts us in these circumstances. But it's like these are all material relationships that are based on material conditions. And if we solve for the material conditions, then we also solve for the gender relations. And we've seen that in the Soviet Union. We saw that in China. And I'm not saying that women don't experience any kind of oppression, because things don't change overnight. Like, I understand that. And also, the women had the tools to gain the independence they need to overcome the oppression in their daily lives, because their material circumstances were taken care of. Versus we live in a society, obviously, it's very much not like that at all.
In Guinea-Bissau, in Burkina Faso, all those short lived in terms of their their gains, but the women who participated in these national liberation struggles found a level of freedom that they had never experienced before. There was work that was being done to get us to a society where we can live and be free. So what does that require? That requires us doing away with these old systems of oppression, including how we have learned to oppress each other. And even if your traditional society is based on women are going to build a hut and make the food, and men are going to go out and forage, we don't got to do that no more. We got technology that allows everybody to go out and forage. To get what we need.
Like I said with Kwame Nkrumah was like, we can't go back, y'all. Like, that was one of his big things, was like, we can't go back. Oh, like, what did he say? Always forward,
yeah,
never
forward
backwards.
ever, backwards never. Yes,
forward ever, backwards never. We even if we wanted to, those relations, those societies are destroyed. They don't exist anymore. And he was talking to Africans. He was talking to the Africans that weren't stolen from their continent. And he was like, yes, even you all, your society has been destroyed by the Europeans. You can't go back to that.
But that's what we do. That's what we
change our
But that's the romanticization of Africa, right? Like African societies is like we had before the white man, we were living like kings and queens.
Oh my
and
God,
then
everybody's king and queen. You already know.
We was not kings and queens. We had organized societies that were based on mutual communal and respect and for society in and of itself. Like, we had to run a village, and everybody had their role in that village. And that, to me, was more dynamic than a society that was built on a king and queen, which is highly oppressive. I don't care where you come from. Like, even within the African context, the essential part, and even within the African context, there is more communality in a so-called kingdom in Africa, because they are not the same as a European kingdom. But I'm digressing. But I wanted to go back into this question.
I could jump on that. I could go way down that rabbit hole.
I know. Me too. And quickly, I as the I feel like the resident philosopher, I want to just bring in some Mao and some Marx, because there's this idea of in dialectical materialism. One of the laws, there's three main laws of dialectical materialism. One of the main laws is the negation of the negation, right? And the negation of the negation being that if something, so you have a thing, let's use say you have your favorite meal, you make this amazing stew or something like that. And then, so it's hot. You make this hot meal. Negation of that is cold. So say you go and freeze that hot meal into a block of ice. And then you're like, actually, I want to eat this now again. So I'm gonna negate that negation. I'm gonna negate that and then make it hot again. That's not the same meal. Like, we've all done that. Where if you freeze the thing, you try to eat it, you're like, this is not.
But make the spaghetti in the refrigerator.
It might be a little bit better though.
And so And so that's what happens
Yeah.
in history. Like that's what happens in history. Like we have a situation. We were Africans. Yes, we did have more communal societies. Maybe we had some matriarchal societies
Mhm.
as well. Like those things are very true. And then colonialism was the negation of that and
Mhm.
came in. And so when we negate that through our liberatory struggles, the negation of that is not going to be back
No.
to those things. And I have a Sankofa tattoo. I
Oh
believe in
yeah.
ancestral wisdom, and I believe that we have so much to learn from history and all that. But we can't have the same thing. The negation of the negation is not the first thing. It is a new thing. Is a different thing.
History is there to be learned from, not to repeat. We don't, because colonialism has done so much damage to the world, and we think that there's a time before colonialism that is perfect, then we try to go back to that thing. When people decolonize, they say they want to go back to their traditional wear, they want to speak their old language. I think it's very important, but that's not it. Like, decolonization means to move forward, to move out of this. It's not to repeat what the colonizer has done. It's to break away from what they have done, and we create a new world that's based on equality.
Right.
And when we talk about like feminism being a part of the revolutionary struggle, we're talking about, no, sorry, I didn't mean that like that. Feminism is not a part of the revolutionary struggle, but feminism is a term that's used to undermine, the work that women have been involved in to get free. And what Jay said earlier about like just usurping, all things that are women centered. I really love what you said about Claudia Jones, because this woman did never. I mean, she
Never
existed
said
before
she was a
feminism. Not never ever, and she probably would spit on y'all's graves, right? Not never ever would she have ever said that she was a feminist. They said Sojourner Truth was an early feminist child. you know, she was an abolitionist that was trying to get free and get, the situation for herself and her people.
I feel like that the idea that Sojourner Truth is a feminist is, I think, a metaphor for how the women's liberation movement treated her at
correct.
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
So remember how? So she was a Dutch native
Hmm.
speaker. She spoke with a Dutch
Yep.
accent. She'd
Right. They
never
always
been to the
say
Nope.
South, as far as I know.
slave language.
And so she was very well
Hmm.
spoken. And when she did speak in a off way, it was because of a Dutch
Correct.
accent, not a Southern
Hmm.
accent. But you would never know that from reading that
Right.
Ain't
transcription,
I a
which is
woman?
ain't all woman. Like she never talked like that in her entire life. And I feel like that's when people are talking about like third wave feminism or hood feminism or like intersectionality and all of these things, I feel like that speech
Uh,
of like Sojourner Truth is like what they're trying to
yeah.
do to the
Yeah.
women's
Yeah.
liberation movement. I'm like, don't superimpose what you think I'm supposed to be thinking and how I'm supposed to be thinking onto your issues. Like I have my own way of being, I have my own way of thinking, and that does not necessarily involve this label, because I don't think the label is useful to us
Mm,
anymore. When every
ever.
incarnation of it turns out problematic. No, but we're this kind of
No.
feminist now. No, but we're this. It's a no
Absolutely.
true Scotsman
Absolutely.
thing, where it's like, all right, well, if this person is the white feminists aren't real feminists, if the imperial feminists aren't real feminists, if these kind of ones are, then it's constantly changing, and there's like new labels being added on, and I'm like, how useful is the label that the majority of instances of it
I
that we
mean,
see
hundreds.
are
Right.
actively oppressive, are like, if Hillary Clinton is using this term, like how useful is this
Child.
term to us? My argument is it's not useful at all. It's not a useful term to me.
Comrade Mariam, we didn't introduce her. Mariam Muhammad is our coming in on the backside. I just want to thank Mariam for being our producer for this section. She's a new comrade, and she helped us with some talking points. And
Correct.
she put a quote in here around a fetus on the is from the works called "A Fetus on the Dirt Road Against Imperial Feminism: Claims of Mass Rape and Exploring the Theory of Sepul sepulchrality. I'll spell it Sepulchrality. I don't know how to pronounce
I
it.
would share
And
reality.
child, I'm gonna figure. I'm just spelled it for y'all. Y'all can figure it out. Where it says, "Black feminists align with the carceral state," and there's a quote from that book that says, "Black feminists who laud Kamala Harris as the paragon of success in women leadership will uplift her intersection identities and hardships of navigating the campaign trail as a top cop, but not completely discard women, but not only completely discard women like Erica Garner, a fighter, and as Dr. Joy James theorizes, a captive maternal. We should do a show around that title. But offer them up for the slaughter. James, who theorizes the captive maternal as one beyond gender binaries, who moves inside the tense contours of conflicted caretaker, protester, movement maker, maroonage, and war resistor, affirms that most Black feminists, conventional abolitionists, seek to reject, obscure, or attack the militant captive maternal. It does not present a moral entanglement for Black feminists to praise Kamala, the head police who peddles representation as a liberation, while poor Black women who are actually at the fore of the struggle for freedom from state repression are left to die destitute and broken. I mean, there's a lot that is said there. But I think the general, you get the general verve, right? That people, feminists are flawed, right? Like we can see the flaw in feminism. We was talking about, I think we had a show about Kamala,
Yeah.
and
And that's one of the things I had in my notes here as far as how hood feminism or intersectionality um as you say, is a flawed theory because it prioritizes white metrics or white power metrics, things that the colonizer think is important: becoming president, becoming vice president, becoming a governor, becoming
Black girl magic girl. Num, num, num.
top prosecutor. So her sending African men to jail, breaking up Black African families is a accomplishment, is a success. When we know that bringing just I believe what over 50% of U.S. People in prison are African people, but we account for 16% of approximately 16% of the population, and creates 23% of around 23% of the 23% of crimes committed, of the actual violent crimes committed, but we overrepresented it in the incarceration system. And you want to applaud her for that. Get the out of here. I want to, if we want to use these bites later, I don't want to use profanity because if we talk it, off, we just throwing them around and everything. But that is not that's not Black girl magic. And Black girl magic, we had, I think you maybe
Let's do away with the term black girl. Black women are not magic, son. We are not we are flesh and blood.
You know what? I wish that I knew that the topic of Black girl magic was going to come up because I just recently watched have you ever seen the Key and Peele? I've seen Key and Peele so many times, but I've been rewatching some of the clips in the Battle of the Magical Negroes. You ever see that?
Oh, it's a movie.
Right.
But yeah, so there's this it's hilarious. I definitely recommend people should look it up. But basically, a white guy is like, he's over his desk and he's all stressed out. And so Black janitor comes in and he's like, well, the best sunrises come after the rain. You know what I mean? He's like saying some whatever. And it's like, oh, thank you. And then it's like, oh, I have all this inspiration. And then another, I think it was the tech guy, I don't remember what, but it was like another magical Negro comes in and they start literally like magic battling it out, like and then at the end of the clip, not to give it away, but it's like a 1-minute sketch, but at the end, they destroy each other and the whole office is destroyed. And Black woman knocks on the door, another maid, and she's like, hi sir, are you okay? And he was like, oh, are you my new magical Negro? She was like, bitch, what? Like, and it just, every time I think about this whole idea that we have these like magical powers, and and I identify somewhat as witchy, and I do think
that's separate, okay?
But this whole like getting my Black girl magic tote bag from Target, like it's another one of those commodified things that has come to yeah, become a trend, rather than, again, I'm always going to be trying to get people to look at the material analysis. But people want to talk about black girl magic instead, and I'm like, well, what about black
But
black
let's talk
girl
about
armed and
but let's
Right.
talk
dangerous?
Let's
about
talk
what black
about Black African women armed resistance.
but let's talk about what
Right.
black girl magic means, right? And like really, because the only reason why somebody would say black girl magic is when they're doing something that sidles them up to white power,
Correct.
or they're doing something that mimics the colonizer. Black girl magic, she did great in gymnastics, or she beat out some, a whole white team from gymnastics, so we're the best at this thing, right? Or black girl magic, we got
Yeah.
these black.
Representation
Yeah,
politics,
it's
basically.
really, black girl magic. We got Oprah's a black girl. I mean, but no black girl magic for somebody who actually fought and got shot up to defend black liberation. No black is a side up black girl magic. You know what I mean? Like, it's Sophia Bukhari, black girl magic. And that's, there's no magic associated with that. We're talking about principle, flesh and blood sacrifices that have to be made, and even the people who do those amazing things and have amazing skills, they should reject the black girl magic too, because
Correct.
they put in hours of hard work. It didn't just
Right.
manifest in some sort of magical
Almost
fairy dust.
been
It actually put in
practicing.
hard work. But I'm digressing. There's so many things associated with this. But I wanted us to bring us back down before we make our announcements and go into any comments and questions
We
and
had a
some
lot to
last
talk
thoughts.
about. We didn't even get
Yeah, we haven't
our topic
even,
list was
we got a lot of talking points, but essentially the purpose of this show is to help people understand like why feminism ain't it.
right.
I mean, I think I opened saying we didn't want to do that, but like essentially we're gonna do that because the primary reason that African women are oppressed is because our whole entire nation is oppressed.
Correct.
Now, we experience a special oppression within the colonized African nation that are things that we have to negotiate and find ways to deal with them, but they're not going to be totally eradicated until our entire nation is dealt with. So we have access to our material resources that can change the material conditions of our people, that will allow for a different kind of arrangement in society because we have abundance. And when you create scarcity, particularly in the black community, particularly for black people, there's going to be a number of things that's going to erupt that helps us deviate from where what we need to be doing. And so it's our responsibility as black women who are part of an oppressed African nation who also experience special oppression. It behooves us to fight for that final conclusion. And in that process, develop strategies, develop dual and contending power, develop ways that we can overturn our relationship to power right now as we're struggling for the ultimate, overturning of relation to power, which is colonialism of the self. Does that make sense? And if it doesn't, I'm gonna say it again because maybe like we're in it. Like some people might say violence. Black women are the highest, da 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 da, and we experience violence at the highest level. Okay, what are we doing to solve that problem? What are we doing to transform our relationship to violence? Are we training ourselves to combat violence? Are we doing political education in our communities? Are we engaged in restorative justice practices within our society right now that are transforming the way that we interact with one another, and that men interact with us? How are we? How, are we? And is that even tied to a long term goal of getting free? Because if it's just to do it, and the overarching system of colonialism, which is still violent and oppressive, still exists, we're not going to totally eradicate or nearly eradicate the things that we're experiencing under special oppression. And so ultimately, anything that we're doing right now has to be tied to that long term goal, that long term or near term, because imperialism is in crisis and is dying. So we have the opportunities to get us to the point where we can free ourselves. And feminism, I don't know what feminism that you are, people might be aligned with. I ain't never seen not one um individual feminist or feminism that would tell me that the ultimate goal is freedom and that they want to.
I mean, I have seen a lot of folks that talk about the ultimate goal is freedom or liberation, but again, it's
But
it's
like
based
what?
on an
Right.
idealistic it's based on an idealistic understanding
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
freedom. And so freedom is like sort of this nebulous
Yeah,
goal where one day men and women will be equal and that whatever. But it's like we need to be talking about
that's
class
what I
struggle.
That's
mean.
that
Yeah,
We're
decolonial.
not,
What
you know.
Miriam told us, decolonial feminism. That's
feminism.
what that is.
Hmm.
Feminism
And
that
it's always a
says
colonial
that
term.
like, oh, we want reparations too. Just,
Yeah, but feminism at its core is a bourgeois concept, and no matter how many times that we iterate it, it's grounded in the bourgeoisie. Like it's grounded in ruling class politic, where white women are attempting to get the same as what white men are. And so, in every iteration of feminism, that means that what that to me and what I've seen is that black women are trying to get what white men have.
mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Not what black men, they don't want nothing what black men have. You know what I'm saying? They want what white men have. They want what white women have. It's always leading people back up to the colonizer and getting what they have, getting a seat at their table, being able to implement their policies. But it's never about getting us to where we have to be, where we're actually don't even have to get it. Like I always say, I don't want a seat at the table. I want to turn the table over. I want to destroy it and put it on a bonfire, because the table has no place. This table that exists is a table for the colonizer to make deals and negotiate your desires with the colonizer. And we don't want no part of those deals and negotiations. So what do? And so our responsibility is to turn that table over and make way for a new fresh world where we can actually have power and not be given power by the colonizer. So I want to take a break real quick and just to go through some announcements before we do the last quarter of our show. So, Comrade
Yep, I
Coco,
am.
you up?
Uhuru. So yeah, thank you for passing over here. Can you show the slide? Okay, you can see it's being seen. The view is a bit different. Oh, my apologies. So before we wrap up and go into our Q&A session, make sure that if you have any questions or want us to discuss anything specific, put it in the chat, and make sure to put where you're watching from as well. We love to see where everyone is watching us from. So yes, go ahead and put your where you're from, put it in the chat, and then let's go ahead into these announcements here. So as you're wrapping up tonight's program, I hope that you're motivated to contribute to the resource goals that we have today, which is $250. Is our and this is for the and these are for the programs of ANWO. ANWO is a volunteer-based organization. Like all of uh, our everyone that's on, from the president yesterday all the way down, we're all volunteers. We sacrifice time out of our lives, out of our whether it be being parents or anything like that, everything like that. We sacrifice. And yesterday talked about sacrificing for the revolution. That's something that we do, but we can use funds to help build our programs. So whether it be creating flyers or posters for our poster program that we have active right now for a REST CPS project. We are needing funds in order to keep this going. We are at this time we are a we're not a not nonprofit. So we there's no grants or uh, anything like that we can use. We use our membership as our membership and our donor levels as to keep the organization sustaining. We do have sustaining donorships that start at just $5 a month and go all the way up to like however much. And I just want to encourage everyone. Every dollar is used for the organization. It's never going into anyone's pocket besides who we have to pay in order to get whatever services and resources that we need for the organization, because we all come into this with a revolutionary aspiration, um, And if you're an African woman, you enjoyed today's program and are inspired and motivated to get not just become a part of annual, but to be active, to be revolutionary. This is a time in society to be organized. I just Jay mentioned Kwame Ture, and I just read watched a Kwame Ture video about mobilization versus organization. We can't just mobilize, and we need to organize. So join the African Nationalist Women Organization. We are the only anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, revolutionary organization for African women. We have members all over the world, including in the continent of Africa, in Europe, Latin America, and all around the United States, and was leading on everyday issues concerning African women. We're not just on the internet. So all of us are active outside the internet. So we are on the ground in our communities organizing for African liberation. So join the International Collective of African Women, building the revolutionary capacity of African women. So to learn more or to join, go to anwohuhuru.org/join. And I mentioned it before, wear your politics. Like with Anwar, Anwar shop has t-shirts, sweatshirts, travel bags, fanny packs. I wear mine all the time. Mugs, hoodies, and even socks. So visit anwohuhuru.org/storefront in order to make your purchase. Also, I think y'all saw me like rubbing earlier today, and that was my decolonize hair and body balm, Black of the Berry hair and body balm. So become a decolonizer. That's what we call our distributors and customers of Decolonize Hair and Body. Decolonize Hair and Body are natural personal care products that highlight ingredients and traditional care practices used by indigenous people all around the world. Um, in addition to featuring images and quotes of African revolutionaries, they are good. You can use the QR code on the screen to make a donation as well as the comment says. So, but for decolonize, from our butters to our conditioners to our oils, I do locks. I do locks for my family, and so I'm always finish off with Rebel oil, and that's more than just a physical ointment. Is also a revolutionary ointment. Putting that into our straight into the bodies of my family and my kids. So make your next purchase of personal care products from us at decolonize.com. If you enjoyed today's program, you see we shouted out Miriam, which is one of our new producers. Help us produce shows like this. Volunteer with us. We are looking for interpreters, video editors, researchers, chat moderators. I know yesterday brought up the Harriet's Daughter anthology. So we need researchers, writers. So if you want to volunteer your skills or learn new skills, email us at info@anwohuhuru.org if you'd like to share your skills. All right, join us next Sunday. Join the Harriet's Daughters book club and study group, which are monthly virtual and in-person meetings led by the African National Women's Organization, where Black women in films come together to discuss books and other literature that centers on African liberation and themes. We invite you to join us, whether you've read the book or not. It's always a great discussion. And I have to, I missed something. We're open to not just Black women in films. I just want to point that out. This is a mass study. So we are open to anyone that's in solidarity or want to, want to read these books with us and discuss these topics. So our next discussion is going to be on next Sunday. We will be discussing compulsory sexuality as colonial control, using refusing compulsory sexuality, a black asexual lens on our sex obsessed culture by Sharonda J. Brown. Brown takes an incisive look on at how anti-blackness, white power, patriarchy, heteronormativity, and capitalism and enact harm against asexual people and African people as a whole, contextualizing asophobia within the racial framework. The next discussion, as I mentioned, is going to be on next Sunday, September 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's open to African women, femmes, and those who are in solidarity with AMWO. Visit amwoilhuru.org/events to stay up to date on all of our upcoming international, national, regional, and local programming. And lastly, join us for a political education discussion. So every third Thursday of the month, AMWO takes over the RNDP live studies. So you can go ahead and register if you're not already registered for these. Zoom registration is tinyurl.com/impedum studies. And we will be discussing charity versus self-determination, the rise of NGOs in the name of helping women and children, that exposes how humanitarian aid and charity, especially when directed at African women and children, are often used to mask colonial capitalist interests and undermine genuine self-determination. We'll examine how the rise of NGOs, while claiming to empower, frequently operates as an extension of imperialism, maintaining dependency, controlling political agendas, and reinforcing colonial narratives of hopelessness. This discussion will challenge the idea that charity is neutral and reveal how true liberation for African people requires organizing for power. So again, register at tinyurl.com/RNDP studies. Uhuru, let me bring my comrades back up. And again, if you have donated, if you want to donate, you can use the URL on the screen, or you can go to amwoilhuru.org/donate, and also through Zelle at info@amwoilhuru.org. Uhuru, Jay, and yesterday, pop up in here, comrades. Let's see if we got any. Did we get any questions? Okay. So it's a few questions. The first one I see here is this organization pro sex workers in terms of organizing them or not? So that's a really good question. That's one of the topics that we didn't get to discuss.
No, that's gonna be a different show.
Okay, we're gonna make a different show
Yeah.
because we had a lot to
Well,
talk
I mean,
about.
I have a quick response. I mean, I feel like we should have a whole show about this, but I mean, I think that
It's a
you know,
it's a complex issue.
it's very complex, and I'll say that, like, I believe that sex workers I consider them the lumpen proletariat, which, for those who don't know anything about Marxism, it's kind of like the quote. What I hate this word.
Uh-oh.
Jay,
Jay,
you're
you
oh,
froze.
we lost Jay.
No.
It's complex, and it's complex this way because we recognize that the colonialism, the scarcity of colonialism, the oppressiveness and toxicity of colonialism forces us as a society to trade sex as a method of getting resources. If we had all the resources that we needed, if we had all the things that we needed in society, trading our bodies for money would probably be the last thing on our list. So this is the analysis that we bring to the table. But we also recognize that we don't live in a non-colonial society, and that our responsibility is to organize people who identify as sex workers as anti-imperialists, as anti-colonialists. You want them to join the African Revolution
Correct.
and bring down the whole thing because, that will eradicate the need for them. I mean, some people might want to do it, but it would eradicate the need for them to trade, sexual sex work for resources. Jay, you were cut off, and I'm sure you were going to say
Yeah,
something really
I was
powerful.
I was just going to say that, the lumpen proletariat, even though Marx himself, he had mixed feelings about that, but I share the beliefs that the Black Panthers and specifically George Jackson had, which is that the lumpen proletariat had the most revolutionary potential out of any class. And
Mhm.
so I think it's really important to organize sex workers, like for that reason, because the lumpen proletariat have the most revolutionary potentials. And I think it's also important to acknowledge the ways in which feminism skews sex work as if
Mhm.
it's something that people choose. And like Yejide
Like
said,
it's
yes,
a point of
it does
empowerment.
happen. I understand that it does happen, and like where people do choose occasionally, but usually those women are in upper class, positions. But the majority of women that are in sex work don't really want to do it. They just are left with no other options. So I think we have to be knowledgeable and face the reality about the reality of the sex industry, which it is an industry based on financial coercion of women, which I feel like financial coercion is not real consent. And so we have to be aware of that fact, and also understand that like the lumpen proletariat are the people that have the most revolutionary potential, and that
Mhm.
they're in these positions because of material circumstances that can be addressed and should be addressed.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, every situation where I thought I was gonna be an escort was not because I wanted to be. It's because I was trying to get something for my baby. Let me tell you something. Like, and as women, you sometimes I'm sure that every woman who has ever um been down on her luck and ain't got nothing, maybe not have enough skills, or maybe they do have enough skills, but this is a thing that you can probably do. And I think that's the situation that we live in. And unfortunately, in this society, that's encouraged in a way that's going to further oppress, further expose and make women vulnerable, in my view. And I know that there's a movement to in this that is to protecting sex workers, which I'm for. But I think the ultimate protection is to be revolutionary, like to actually make the demand and also organize ourselves to do away with this thing. Thank you so much for that question, and we're
Yes.
also excited for you finding us Plamede. I think I'm
Yes.
saying it right. Plamedy.
Plametti also asks, do you guys have revolutionary artists in your organization? Absolutely.
And I responded.
African
I responded. I said, "Yeah,
Okay.
we have more, we have room for more. There's never
Always
not enough."
right. Because
um,
culture is important.
I want to go back to Geo. Geo made a comment. Geo has some really great comments at the top of the hour, at the top of the 90 minutes, and here's another one. It was just, this person says that it's very important for women intellectual contributions to get flattened or subsumed under umbrella categories and managed by bourgeois. And Geo was saying this in relation to that feminism does this and it's wrong, right? So feminism is very important for women intellectual contributions to be flattened or subsumed under the umbrella categories and managed by bourgeois patriarchal structures. So, anything that a woman is producing is now then tied underneath this feminist. I mean, that's why you see a lot of feminist courses in college, like there's gender studies, and this is where a lot of people learn how to be feminists, and a lot of people learn how to be revolutionaries by the streets.
Okay.
I didn't take no gender study class, y'all. And when I was told that I was going to be the woman that's going to represent AMWO in the women's question, I was just like, that's interesting. I'm trying to get our people free, but like you learn how to be a revolutionary in the streets, and you learn how to be a feminist for the most part in bourgeois institutions.
I
So
unite with that.
I don't see any additional comments, any new ones that I didn't pin any. Let me see. But of course, if you have anything, uh, oh, okay.
You see another one?
Yeah, no, it's just a comment that Plamedy said. I think that's a really good idea. On the book, feminist porn book. I loved reading. I don't know anything about it, but I'm gonna definitely look it up and see. For we have a Harriet's Daughters book club that Carmen Coco did just say announcing that if people are interested and want to volunteer some titles for us to read together or to have a study together, let us know. And then when we put that out there, we will put the announcement out on our event site. We always list all the events that we have. and we will, feel free to register and, get into our network, get into our sphere. But yeah, I think ultimately what it's really important for us to do is to do. I mean, the work is needed, right? We know that the feminist ideology is the dominant one, and we saw somebody on X, put out the realness, right, around what feminism is and what it does. And this person purports to be an anti-imperialist. And I think it's really important because some people throw around these terms like I'm an anti-imperialist, a radical black feminist, and I'm all these, but they're not really, because what they're saying and what they're doing are two different things, right? What they're aligning themselves with are two different things. So you be a feminist, anti-imperialist, but still be in support of imperialists and imperialism in the form of women. So we're, if it's a woman that's now ascended to the throne of some sort of institution or a state thing, that somehow, and it's particularly if she's a black woman or a so-called woman of color, then it's more acceptable for that person to get a pass, even though what they're doing is representing imperial. They're not up there talking about revolution. They're not up there talking about the African working class or the working class. They're not there to put down policies that's going to transform the lives and transform the system. And they're there to support US imperialism. And when we when we become dialectical and we look at like the material, like not what we want in our heads, not what we think they're thinking. There's some people who's like, yeah, he's really down for us, but he's not saying it because he can't or she can't. And I'm like, no, what are they actually doing? What are they actually saying that is coming out of their mouth?
Right. It's like how people are like, Kamala would have been she would have been better on the Gaza stuff. And I'm like, she's not dead. She could speak out right now.
Right.
She's not. Like, you know?
Yeah, it's like, oh, she's just doing that because no, you're doing it because you signed up for it. Like
Correct.
if I signed up to be the VP of the United States, I'd be like, yeah, I'm supporting US imperialism. Like I
I
mean,
mean, she
if
literally said, like, we need to have the most lethal military in the world. Like, that is an admission of imperialism. Like, that is an open admission that she is pro-imperialism,
Right.
it was her platform when she was
That was
running for
literally
president.
a platform. Like,
It
And
was her platform.
we had a breakdown about that, about the canons before then, and
We sure did.
mhm.
We sure did. And
we
I think,
definitely
and that's what feminism does. It leads you to this road with these kinds of respectability, representational politics is enough, because what feminism wants you to do is to obtain annals, get into the annals of power. And through more women engaging in politics in whatever ways, engaging in the military, getting equality in the police. Um, run that photo. We almost forgot we had a slideshow. Come on, run that slideshow. Yes.
Oh, I don't know if folks can see that in my
Let
head.
me
love.
let's do
I
this.
have
Yeah.
another one too. Here, let's do this 5. What about 5? Yeah, so it's like, I don't know if y'all can see this, but in this upper left tweet, it's an Israeli woman who
Mhm.
has a Muslim woman who's tied up and blindfolded in the background. So it's like women empowerment, and then there's another meme that's like, the next one will be sent by a woman. How it really makes you feel like you're part of something, you know? Yeah, this
Yeah.
imperial feminism.
Let's go through this. I want to see some more because these are interesting. So let me see. Was there any more images? Do, 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 do. Yeah, I think it would
Right.
pink feminism, right? So
Oh
these
yeah,
women would die for Rhodesia. That's the equality that imperialism wants you to have. You know, we want women in the kitchen until it's time for them to be cute on the field or to pick up a gun for imperialism. But other than that, stay your ass in the kitchen or doing something that men want you to do. And in this case, this is what it is. Like, you see women who, the way that imperialism promotes equality is by saying now you can be a part of the military. And women like, yeah, that's great. We are most equal. But in the meantime, you over here like, oppressing other women in the military, women and men, We gotta scroll up. That's a good picture, Carmen. I wonder if we can. I guess we didn't. It
Oh,
didn't. It cut it off. But
yeah. Yeah, the picture, just to describe what it is, it's basically a bunch of women Israeli soldiers that are like taking a selfie, like kind of doing girl power thing. But there's this question in the chat that's asking about what would you happen to have any recommended readings based on today's subject? And yes, I
Did
do
you see?
actually.
Did you see? I
So,
went over there, start
so
picking up.
there's
I mean,
so many.
book. Sophia Bakari has this
Sophia
book called The
McCart,
War
that's in my
Before.
car.
Yep. So yeah, The War Before, definitely. There's a really good quote. I love it. I'm going to read it right now because it's one of my favorite quotes. She says, "I'm not a feminist. I am a revolutionary. I am a
Correct.
scientific socialist. I believe that we have to struggle on all fronts against those attitudes that threaten to destroy us as a people." It's facts.
Guru. Jay brought up Claudia Jones. Claudia Jones has several several articles in this book, Organized Fight Win. I got African Women in Revolution. I grabbed the new Jim Crow, but that's just, I don't think so. I got Taste of Power because we mentioned the Black Panthers. My War
Fighting,
Before
fighting,
Star,
fighting two colonialisms in
Fighting Two
Guinea-Bissau.
Colonialisms,
Yeah.
Asada. Those are just what I was able to grab offhand on my shelf offhand. But like these two right here and the War Before. Oh, we also read our discussion before a couple months ago. We read Andre Boleyn's My Country Africa, which was a good view of African women who worked with dang it. She worked with the anti-colonial efforts in
Congo.
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 Thank you. Thank you. My brain was like, where are we again?
I mean that book alone is just she doesn't talk specifically about feminism or anything like that, but the book alone will give you like a real understanding of the conditions of colonialism, the systems of colonialism, how women were treated under how African women and so-called biracial African women were treated under colonialism. So, and yeah, I
So
think
one more
black men should
question.
read the same.
Well, so okay, nobody
I
reads.
have
Let's be
one.
real. Nobody reads books anymore.
Okay.
So I will say that I'm going to put this in the chat. Thomas Sankara has a
Yeah,
famous
Thomas
speech
Sankara.
that's called "The Revolution Cannot Triumph Without the Emancipation of Women," and he provides a dialectical analysis of women's oppression. Definitely recommend any and every person read that. It's really amazing. It's not a whole book. It's just it's a speech. So hopefully folks can get through it because I know
We read, Jay.
let's be real though, most of US society does not read. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, Jay. Yes, I agree with that. Also, look out for the announcement for Harriet's Daughter Films. We will be having our a film on Blessed Little Hearts on September 13th, September 19th. Totally forgot about it. There you go.
Let me scroll in. This is the image that we were referring to. I had to scroll it up. Okay, but say that. Explain the image again, Jay.
Oh yeah, it's an image that people often use as like sort of like the girl power image for Israel because it's all like women IOF agents or IOF soldiers that are taking a selfie on top of the ruins of Gaza, and of course smiling and happy.
Girl boss imperialism. Yeah. I was gonna say IOF girl magic.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's The Breakdown. And we said a lot and the more could be said, but just keep following us. We do these monthly. So our next one is going to be on September 21st and Sunday, September 21st. And I am We are happy to have all of you join us then. Definitely sign up, get into our sphere. If you're an African woman, please join. If you're not an African woman and want to support and you love what you heard today, definitely donate, sign up to be a volunteer, be down with us, because this is where you spoke. This is the cool kids club over here. So
Imperialist.
we are the cool kids club for African women. So thank y'all so much and uhuru.